Welcome to today's deep dive. We're going to sort through all the noise and get to the most interesting stuff happening in the news. Today we've got education, AI, even a bit of philosophy and some trivia about a 60s band.
Sounds like we've got a lot to cover, but it's always fascinating how those seemingly unrelated topics connect.
Definitely. So let's jump right in with the Department of Education. It seems Elon Musk, as head of Trump's Department of Government Efficiency, has his sights set on it.
There are even whispers of a possible executive order to downsize it.
Yeah.
This isn't completely out of left field, though, right? Like, remember back in Trump's first term, there was that push to merge education and labor? This kind of seems like more of that, maybe even a step towards dismantling the whole department.
Right.
And then you add on the news about all those education department employees being put on paid leave. It definitely makes you wonder what's coming next.
It really does. It
Yeah.
makes you think about the future of public education in the U.S.
Mhm.
and if this is about efficiency or something more like a power grab.
Yeah, some critics are saying this could be a way to gain more control over education, especially given Musk's support for school choice and charter schools. It could mean a huge shift in education as we know it.
For sure. Okay, switching gears totally, we've got California State University going all in on AI. They're teaming up with tech companies to offer free AI tools and training to all students and faculty.
That's a huge statement about the growing importance of, well, some are calling it AI literacy. Just like internet skills became essential, understanding and using AI is becoming more and more crucial. Seems like the university thinks this is the future of education.
It's a fascinating experiment, and everyone's going to be watching to see how it goes.
Yeah.
Daily Nos, the philosophy blog, is actually asking professors how they're using AI in their work, which should give us some interesting perspectives on this shift in academia.
Oh, I bet the response will be all over the place. But the fact that they're even asking the question just shows how big of an impact AI is having on higher education.
Makes you wonder how these tools will shape research and teaching, Maybe even how we think about knowledge itself.
Yeah, definitely.
And speaking of thinking about knowledge, there's a new paper out that's exploring how people misunderstand the whole idea of free will.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting.
It suggests that maybe our intuitions about free will are actually based on bad reasoning, maybe even like motivated beliefs.
That raises some pretty deep questions about how much control we really have over our actions and choices.
Totally. This kind of philosophical stuff always gets me thinking. Actually, I've been struggling with this feeling lately. Like I'm forgetting the past, neglecting the present, and just totally scared of the future. It's like this constant cycle of anxiety.
That's, it's interesting you say that. Seneca, that Roman philosopher from way back, like 2,000 years ago, he said, life is very short and anxious for those who forget the past, neglect the present, and fear the future. Kind of wild how relevant that still feels today, right? Like a reminder to just be present and mindful in this crazy world full of distractions.
Yeah, wow. That really puts things in perspective. Okay, switching gears again. A blog post caught my eye about the Monkees, the band from the 60s. Apparently, they intentionally misspelled their name to avoid a musical pun.
Haha, really?
Yeah.
That's a great example of how much thought can go into even the simplest things, like a band's name. It's all about wordplay and branding, even for a band that's known for being like lighthearted and fun. Makes you appreciate the strategy behind creating a memorable image.
Totally. It's a reminder that every detail matters.
Yeah.
Okay, back to more serious news. It looks like Elon Musk is publicly feuding with Sam Altman.
Ah, yes. Their clash over Project Stargate, that new government-backed AI infrastructure project, has been hard to miss. Musk's been pretty skeptical, saying he doubts the project's potential and even making fun of the funding claims.
It seems like Musk is always cautious, even critical of advancements in AI. His worries about this project seem to echo his past warnings about the dangers of AI if it's not controlled. Do you think this project is really different, or is this like a pattern with him?
Well, you have to remember that Musk actually co-founded OpenAI, the organization behind Project Stargate, before leaving because of disagreements about its direction. So maybe his criticism comes from a deeper philosophical difference with Altman, who leads OpenAI now, about how to develop and use AI responsibly.
That's a good point. This whole conflict really highlights that tension at the heart of the AI conversation, balancing the drive for innovation with the need for caution and ethical considerations.
Absolutely. Musk's skepticism might seem like he's just being contrarian to some people, but it forces us to ask some really important questions about what could happen if we let technology advance without any checks and balances.
It definitely does. Okay, shifting to another story that's been making the rounds, there's this discussion about the ethical implications of the U.S. intervening militarily against Mexican drug cartels.
Ah, yeah. A philosopher has argued that such an intervention could be justified, using just war theory as the basis for their argument. To understand that argument, you need to know that just war theory lays out specific conditions that have to be met for a war to be considered morally right. Things like having a just cause, the right intention, legitimate authority, a reasonable chance of success, and so on.
So applying that theory to the cartel situation brings up some really complicated questions, like does the threat from the cartels meet the criteria of a just cause? And what could be the unintended consequences of a military intervention in a sovereign nation?
It's a thorny issue, no doubt about it. This philosopher's argument, whether you agree with it or not, forces us to face the really difficult moral and geopolitical dilemmas involved in this kind of decision. It highlights how important it is to understand just war principles and how they apply to real-world situations.
Absolutely. And it leads us to another ethically charged debate, this one centered around immigration policy.
Right. A prominent Catholic philosopher has weighed in on the controversies surrounding the Church's stance on immigration. This issue is particularly complicated because it's about finding a balance between compassion for those looking for a better life and upholding the rule of law and national security.
Exactly. And even within the church, there are different viewpoints on how to handle this complex issue.
Uh-huh.
Some people emphasize the church's long history of welcoming immigrants and refugees, while others are worried about the potential strain on resources and social services.
The philosopher's contribution to this discussion really highlights the internal struggle the church is facing as it tries to deal with changing social values and stay true to its core teachings.
This whole debate shows how tough it is for institutions to balance competing values and address complex social issues in a world that's constantly evolving.
It certainly does.
Okay, and speaking of challenges, with water shortages getting worse all over the world, a blog post is exploring this idea of re-drinking water, basically recycling wastewater for people to drink. Now, I know the thought of drinking recycled wastewater might sound a little icky at first, but it's important to think about the reality of our situation. With less and less fresh water available, we might have to rethink our ideas about what's acceptable and start looking at innovative solutions like this.
It's true. Our perceptions can change as circumstances change. What was once unthinkable might become a necessity when we're facing scarcity. This issue really pushes us outside of our comfort zones and makes us confront the limitations of how we do things now.
Well, we've covered a lot of ground in this first part of our deep dive. From the future of education and the role of AI to complex ethical dilemmas and the importance of staying present, these stories give us a glimpse into the many sides of the world we live in.
What strikes me is how these seemingly separate issues often overlap, revealing these interconnected patterns and trends that have a huge impact on our lives.
It's those connections that make these deep dives so fascinating. It's not just about the individual stories, but about understanding how they fit into the bigger picture of our times.
And as we navigate an increasingly complex world, recognizing those connections and really thinking critically becomes even more crucial.
Absolutely. We'll be right back with more of your personalized news deep dives after a short break.
This whole re-drinking water thing, it brings up some interesting psychological and societal questions, like how do we get over that ick factor so many people have when it comes to recycled wastewater?
Oh, for sure. I mean, we tend to be grossed out by things we think are dirty or unnatural, even if those ideas are based on outdated info or just cultural biases. To get past that, you'd probably need a combo of education, being transparent about the safety of the recycled water, and maybe even a gradual shift in what's considered normal.
Speaking of shifting norms, there's this really interesting philosophical discussion going on about the nature of thought and understanding. There's a blog post exploring this concept of cognition as computation. It basically asks, are our brains just really complex computers?
Whoa, that's a mind-blowing thought. If our brains are just super fancy biological computers, does that mean our thoughts and feelings are just the result of complicated algorithms? Does it, take away from the uniqueness of human consciousness?
Those are some big questions that philosophers and scientists have been wrestling with forever. This blog post digs into the history of that debate, looking at different views on the connection between mind and matter, consciousness, and computation.
I bet there are strong opinions on both sides.
Totally. Some people say that reducing the human mind to calculations just strips away the mystery and beauty of consciousness. Others think that understanding the brain as a computer system could lead to breakthroughs in artificial intelligence and help us understand human thinking even better.
It's a conversation that really pushes the boundaries of what we know and makes us confront those fundamental questions about what it means to be human. Okay, let's lighten things up a bit and go back to philosophy, but this time with a little Nietzsche.
Right, Nietzsche. He had some pretty strong opinions about those obscure thinkers, the ones who seem more interested in sounding smart than actually sharing meaningful ideas.
Oh, you mean the intellectual show-offs who use jargon and complicated language to hide the fact that they don't really have anything to say?
Exactly. Nietzsche believed that truly brilliant thinkers strive for clarity and accessibility. They want their ideas to be understood and to make a difference in the world. The ones who just want to seem profound often resort to obscurity and complexity, almost like they're trying to hide a lack of depth.
That's a good reminder to be careful about what we consume.
Mhm.
We should be wary of those who prioritize sounding impressive over actually communicating in a clear and meaningful way.
Well said. All right, let's shift gears again and look at what's happening with the American Psychological Association, the APA. They've released some reflections on their past and present, maybe hinting at where they're headed in the future.
The APA is a major player in psychology, so their thoughts on how the field has evolved are definitely worth paying attention to. What kind of reflections are they sharing?
They're acknowledging some of the tough stuff the field has faced, like issues with diversity, inclusion, and using psychological principles ethically and responsibly. It seems like they're aiming for more transparency and a deeper understanding of the complexities within the field.
It's good to see such a big organization doing some self-reflection and admitting where they can improve.
Absolutely. They're also highlighting how psychology is changing to address current societal issues, things like mental health disparities, climate change, and how technology impacts human behavior.
It sounds like they're taking on a broader view of what psychology's role is in the 21st century.
Exactly. They're stressing that psychologists need to engage with these complex challenges and be part of finding solutions. And speaking of challenges, the APA blog has this pretty sobering piece about the potential for abuse of power in academia.
That's a really important issue. Power imbalances happen everywhere, but they can be especially damaging in academic settings, where students are often vulnerable and rely heavily on their mentors.
The article focuses on what one grad student went through with their dissertation supervisor, who was really overbearing. It shows how easily those power dynamics can be taken advantage of, leading to situations where students feel pressured, like they can't speak up or even exploited.
It's a stark reminder that even in places dedicated to knowledge and critical thinking, we have to be on guard to protect vulnerable individuals and make sure everyone's acting ethically.
Couldn't agree more. Transparency, accountability, and clear rules for ethical conduct are key to creating a safe and supportive environment for learning. On a lighter note, the APA blog also has this fun post about the Monkees, that band known for their playful and catchy tunes.
The Monkees, I love them. What's this post about?
It looks at the clever wordplay behind their name, explaining that they intentionally misspelled monkeys to avoid a musical pun. It's just a fun reminder that even something as seemingly simple as a band's name can have these interesting backstories and clever linguistic twists.
I always love those little glimpses into the creative process. Makes you appreciate the thought and intention behind things, even the lighthearted stuff. But let's circle back to a more serious issue, the ongoing water crisis.
Yeah, it's a huge problem. A recent blog post really digs into the urgent need for solutions, and it brings up that idea of re-drinking water, again, recycling wastewater for people to drink.
I get that it might seem kind of gross at first, but we have to be realistic about how bad the situation is. With freshwater sources drying up, we need to explore every option, even the ones that challenge our usual ways of thinking.
Right. The author goes into the science of how it works, explaining how advanced filtration and treatment processes can actually remove contaminants and make the water safe to drink.
So the technology is there. The bigger hurdle might be getting people over the psychological and social stigma of drinking recycled water. How do we change people's minds and make this a more acceptable solution?
That's a tough one. It'll take education, transparency, and maybe even a shift in our cultural norms. People need to understand why it's necessary, that the treated water is safe, and how it's better for the environment than just relying on shrinking freshwater sources.
This is a perfect example of how tackling global challenges often means combining technological innovation, social adaptation, and a willingness to rethink our assumptions.
And speaking of challenging assumptions, there's this interesting debate going on about alcohol and its impact on society.
Oh yeah, that's always a lively topic. What's the focus of this debate?
One blog post suggests that raising taxes on alcohol could help reduce violence. The idea is that higher prices would discourage excessive drinking, which is often linked to aggression and violent incidents.
That's an interesting idea, but I imagine it would be pretty controversial. Some people would see it as interfering with personal freedom.
Definitely. It brings up those classic questions about balancing individual choice with the well-being of society. Where do we draw the line between government intervention and personal responsibility?
It's a complex issue with no easy answers, and it'll probably keep sparking debates for a long time. It reminds us that even seemingly simple policy proposals can have ripple effects and touch on deeply held values.
And while we're on the topic of nuanced issues, there's this thought-provoking discussion about validity, a term you hear a lot in research and social science.
I'm always up for exploring the tools and frameworks we use to evaluate information. What's the focus of this discussion on validity?
Well, the blog post breaks down different types of validity: internal, external, construct, even something called face validity.
Sounds like a deep dive into the various ways we assess the truthfulness, accuracy, and relevance of claims and findings.
Exactly. Understanding these different types of validity can help us critically evaluate information and tell the difference between claims that are well supported and those that aren't very rigorous or credible.
That's especially crucial now, with information overload everywhere. Having these tools to assess validity can help us navigate all the noise and make better sense of things.
Absolutely. It's about being more discerning and critical about how we consume information. And speaking of intellectual discernment, there's this article that really grabbed my attention about the challenges of writing about intellectual history in a postmodern world.
Sounds like something for those who are interested in how ideas evolve and the complexities of historical interpretation.
The article looks at how our understanding of intellectual history has moved beyond just focusing on specific forms of thought. It argues for a more nuanced approach, one that takes into account the fluidity and interconnectedness of ideas, acknowledging that they don't exist in isolation but are constantly influencing and shaping each other.
It reminds us that history isn't just a static collection of facts, but a dynamic and evolving interpretation of the past.
Precisely. And this article emphasizes how important it is to recognize the biases and perspectives that shape historical narratives, understanding that there are often multiple and sometimes conflicting interpretations of the same events or ideas.
It's a call for a more critical engagement with the past, recognizing that our understanding of history is always being refined and reinterpreted.
Well said. On a sadder note, there's news of the passing of Christer Segerberg, a renowned professor emeritus of philosophy at Uppsala University.
It's always tough to hear about the loss of such an important figure in the world of ideas. What was Professor Segerberg known for?
He was highly respected for his work in logic, particularly modal logic, which explores how we use language to express possibility, necessity, and other modal concepts.
His contributions will be missed. It's a reminder that even amidst the constant flood of news and information, we should take time to acknowledge those who have enriched our understanding of the world.
I agree. And speaking of enriching our understanding, there's this touching piece on the APA blog about the struggles grad students face in their pursuit of higher education.
I'm always interested in hearing about the experiences of those navigating academia. What kind of insights does this piece offer?
It dives into the struggles of one particular grad student whose dissertation journey was filled with obstacles, self-doubt, financial stress, and a lack of support from their advisor.
It highlights how demanding the path to higher education can be and how much it requires resilience, perseverance, and a strong support system.
The article calls for universities to create more robust support systems for grad students, recognizing the unique challenges they face and how important it is to support their well-being.
It's about acknowledging that success in academia isn't just about intelligence, but also about having the emotional and practical resources to handle the often grueling demands of grad school.
Exactly. Okay, on a lighter note, there's this piece that caught my eye about how language is evolving in our digital age.
Oh, language is fascinating. I'm always intrigued by how it adapts to new technology and social trends.
This article is like an illustrated love letter to words and the meanings we give them. It celebrates the power of language to connect us, even in a world that's increasingly dominated by screens and digital communication.
It's a lovely sentiment. With all the talk about emojis replacing words and the rise of visual communication, there's something enduring and powerful about the written and spoken word.
The author argues that language isn't just a tool for conveying information, it's a fundamental part of what makes us human. It shapes our thoughts, emotions, identities, and relationships.
It's a good reminder that even in our tech-driven world, language is still a vital and vibrant force.
Absolutely. And as we wrap up this part of our deep dive, I'd encourage you to think about the stories we've discussed. From those philosophical questions about cognition as computation to the ethical dilemmas around water scarcity and the ever-changing role of language, we've explored a wide range of topics that speak to the complexities of our world.
It's been a really thought-provoking journey through the latest news and ideas, and I hope it sparked your curiosity and given you some things to ponder.
Remember, this is just a glimpse of what's happening out there. There's always more to explore, more to learn, and more to talk about.
We'll be back after a short break to continue our deep dive into today's news, taking a closer look at AI, power dynamics, and the ethical challenges we're facing as a nation and a global community. Welcome back to the deep dive. We've covered a ton already, but there's still so much more to uncover. Let's get back to that whole Elon Musk and Sam Altman situation.
Right, their very public feud over Project Stargate, that government-backed AI project, it's been everywhere. Musk hasn't held back on his doubts, questioning the project's potential and even, making fun of the funding claims.
And given his history with OpenAI, plus his very vocal worries about the potential dangers of AI if it's not controlled, his skepticism kind of makes sense. But is there something specific about this project that's bothering him? Or is this more of a, fundamental disagreement with Altman's vision for how AI should be developed?
Well, word on the street is that Musk left OpenAI because of differences in where they wanted to take things. He seems to be all about caution when it comes to AI, really stressing safety and ethics. Altman, though, seems more focused on pushing the limits of what AI can do, believing the benefits outweigh the risks.
This whole clash really underscores that tension we've been talking about throughout this deep dive, balancing innovation with the need for responsible and ethical development. It's not just the tech world thing, right? It's happening everywhere as we try to figure out how to deal with technology advancing so quickly and the impact it has on society.
You're spot on. The decisions we're making about AI right now are going to have huge lasting effects. It's so important for all of us as informed citizens to be part of these conversations and think about the long-term consequences.
Exactly. And speaking of choices with big consequences, there's that debate that's flared up again about whether the U.S. should get involved militarily against Mexican drug cartels. This is a really tricky situation with big moral and geopolitical implications.
Yeah. One philosopher has argued that intervention could be justified, but only under certain conditions. They're using just war theory as a framework for looking at the situation. Like we talked about before, just war theory sets out specific criteria for a war to be considered morally acceptable.
But applying those criteria to this situation with the cartels, it's not simple at all.
Yeah.
You have to really weigh how serious the threat is, how likely it is that intervention would actually work, and what the unintended consequences might be, both for the people of Mexico and for U.S.-Mexico relations.
Definitely. This philosopher's argument, even if you don't agree with it, makes us confront the really complicated aspects of just war theory in a real-world situation. It forces us to ask those hard questions about things like national sovereignty, the responsibility of powerful countries to step in when there are humanitarian crises, and whether military intervention could actually make things worse.
Those are questions that need careful consideration and thoughtful analysis. There aren't any easy answers, and the stakes are incredibly high.
No doubt about it. And on a related note, the ongoing debate about U.S. immigration policy continues to be a hot-button issue, with strong opinions on all sides. A Catholic philosopher has jumped into the conversation, offering their perspective on the complexities of the Church's stance on immigration.
This is a particularly tough one for the Church, right? They're trying to balance their long tradition of welcoming immigrants and refugees with concerns about national security and the potential strain on resources.
Right. The philosopher acknowledges that tension and emphasizes the need for a balanced approach, one that recognizes both the humanitarian need to help people and the legitimate concerns of countries trying to manage their borders and protect their citizens.
It shows that even within an institution like the Catholic Church, which can seem very unified, there are diverse opinions and ongoing debates about how to handle complex social and political issues.
Absolutely. The Church's struggle to find that middle ground reflects the broader societal struggle to define our moral responsibilities to those seeking refuge and opportunity. It's a conversation that requires empathy, understanding, and a willingness to consider perspectives that might be different from our own.
Well said. And speaking of challenging issues without easy answers, the global water crisis is getting worse, which has put the spotlight back on finding creative solutions. That idea of re-drinking water, recycling wastewater for people to drink, is getting more attention as a possible way to deal with dwindling freshwater resources.
Right. Like we discussed earlier, the technology for water recycling is definitely there and can make water that's safe to drink. But the psychological and social hurdles, those are a different story.
Yeah, it requires a real shift in thinking, being open to new ideas, and challenging those deeply ingrained ideas about what we're comfortable with and what we really need.
It shows us that progress often means pushing ourselves out of our comfort zones and confronting those beliefs and habits that we take for granted. The water crisis really highlights how global challenges demand creative solutions and a willingness to adapt to a changing world.
This deep dive has taken us all over the place through all these complex issues and interconnected challenges. We've explored the potential and the risks of AI, wrestled with ethical dilemmas, and faced the urgent need for innovative solutions to those pressing global problems.
It's been a really thought-provoking journey through the latest news and insights.
As we wrap up, we hope you'll keep engaging with these issues, challenge your own assumptions, and seek out diverse perspectives. The world's a complicated and ever-changing place, and staying informed and engaged is essential for navigating all the challenges and opportunities that are out there.
Remember, this is just the start of the conversation. Keep exploring, keep learning, and keep diving deep. Until next time.